Hey there, and welcome to episode 11 of the Inkwell Gamers podcast. Today we are finishing our starter deck review and upgrades, ending with the Sapphire Steel deck. So like the others, what we'll be doing is covering what's in it, how it plays, our first impressions versus how we now feel about it, and then give 3 additional ways to play with this deck. So we'll have Dalton giving you a budget deck upgrade. I'll bring an upgrade that isn't necessarily budget friendly, and then we'll have a third deck. And so I know Dalton's excited to present his third deck.
Oh, yeah.
It might be bad, but it's fun. We'll just tell you that.
You know, fun is all that really matters, too.
That's true.
Unless you only get fun from winning, and then don't play this deck.
Don't play that. But otherwise, I think it's a really cool dynamic. So we'll get into that. Before we get into that, though, we have something really exciting going on tomorrow.
Yes, we have a relatively big paper tournament tomorrow.
We do, at our LGS.
Yeah, about, what is that, half hour away? Not too bad, not too bad. So, yeah, it's a 1K, so there will be $1,000 in prizes. If the event fills up, then I think he said there will probably be around $2,000 in prizes, something like that. But yeah, as long as like 30 people show up, it's going to be a pretty nice event. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm excited. What kind of deck are you bringing?
I am bringing some version of Ruby Amethyst Control. I have not decided on the exact build. I have so many different thoughts and opinions on this deck that I'm struggling with the correct build. Yeah. What about you?
There's a lot of options, and it's hard to narrow, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to be bringing some sort of variation of the deck I used in League last week. Mm-hmm. So Emerald, Amethyst, Tempo. There are a couple of cards that I had in there last week that I think I might swap out. So originally I did put Mother Gothel. I know she's bad in general, but I
don't think she's bad in general. She just might not be good enough.
A lot of people rip on her, though.
Yeah, well, that's just because she's compared to John Silver and Genie, I think, which are better.
Yeah. Well, better. I do already have Genie in my deck as it is, and I think I might take her out and swap her for John Silver.
Yep.
So I just need to, I think I'm going to do that, which I know that we are going to kind of get our decks together after we record this. So probably going to swap those 2 out, and then I honestly think that might be it, but yeah, playing Mad Hatter, Cheshire, Cusco, Genie on the Job, Rafiki. Those are like my main cards that I really want to try to see.
Mm-hmm. Friends on the other side.
Friends on the other side, for sure.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I get
but
you.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm really excited too.
I hope a lot of people come because it's only going to be as fun if there are a lot of people there.
Yeah, I've seen on at least that post that he shared, I don't know, a few months, was it a month ago? Mm-hmm. I've seen some people probably an hour and 15 minutes away from that game store. They're interested in coming, so as long as the word is out there,
yes,
I think we're going to have some people join.
I think so. It'll be fun. So, all right, well, are you ready to get in?
Yeah, let's do this. Let's talk about the Steel and Sapphire starter deck.
Cool. So as far as an overview of cards go, I'll just go down the list really quick for what you can find in the starter deck. Flounder, Captain Hook, Forceful Duelist, Goons. Side note, I love the Goons flavor text.
It's so funny.
It's something like they might not be useful, but they came with the castle or something to that extent. I think
they might be useless, but they come with the castle.
Yes. I think that is hilarious. Probably one of my favorite flavor texts of the set. So, and then Aurora, Regal Princess, Grammatala, Prince Eric, Jasmine, Disguised, Mickey Mouse Detective, Hercules, Kristoff, Aurora Briar Rose, Maleficent Sinister Visitor, Aurora Dreaming Guardian, Maleficent Uninvited, Beast Hard-Headed, Simba Rightful Heir, Mufasa, Scar Mastermind, Simba Returned King, Maui Demigod, Develop Your Brain, Fire the Cannons, Ransack, Smash, One Jump Ahead, Grab Your Sword, Magic Golden Flower, and Coconut Basket.
Oh, yeah.
So the idea behind this deck is basically to control the board, to give enough time for you, and ramp your Inkwell to get to your more heavy hitters, which are more expensive ink-wise. It is a slow deck, but that's pretty much the game plan, is to bide enough time with your challengers to control the board, get your opponent's threats off enough to give you time to ramp that inkwell into your Maui and your Simba and Mufasa, your big characters.
Right.
Yeah. So what was your first impressions of it? And how do you feel it is now? Is it changed? Is it the same?
I originally thought that this was the worst starter deck. And for me, in Magic, I am someone that loves mana ramp. I love green decks in Magic. But I feel like this deck just didn't have enough good cards to really ramp into. Mm-hmm. You have Maui, which is an 8-cost character. It's big, it quests for a lot. But for me, it just... You have one of those. It's just not enough. I mean, you do have like that 7 ink Simba as well, and a couple Mufasas, a Scar. Mm-hmm. But we have... What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think we have 7 cards in the main deck that ramp ink, and just 5 payoffs, and then a lot of mid-range cards that don't really fit either game plan.
Right.
Like the Jasmine and the...
Like the Kristoff.
Yeah, the Kristoff. Yeah, that's the next one I was thinking of. So it just didn't seem cohesive enough. Mm-hmm. It wasn't interesting enough for me to want to keep playing. It's not like the Amethyst Ruby deck that has like a lot of play to it either. So yeah, it has some fine cards. I mean, Beast is a good card, but I mean, and some of the challenges are good cards. It just doesn't really do it for me. Mm-hmm. What'd you think?
I hate it.
Hate? That is a strong word.
You're right. Okay, fine. I strongly disliked it.
No, you hate it. It's fine.
Yeah, I think the main thing is because the main component of it is a bunch of challengers. Mm-hmm. And challenging just isn't my preferred play style. So I just don't really enjoy playing with it. I can't remember. I think I thought this was the worst from the beginning. Right? Or was that Amber Amethyst?
No, you thought the Amber Amethyst one was
the worst, and then this one was like a middle tier, and I swapped the two.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I only think that I first initially thought this was like a middle tier just because it seemed to have... I don't know, I really liked the concept of Grammatala, and then just having some of like the big heavy hitters like the Maui, and then there's a bunch of damage inflicting cards within here, like Fire the Cannons, Smash, Grab Your Sword. So I think that's why I thought it was kind of like a middle tier. It was really slow though, but I think as time progressed, I definitely think this is the worst.
Yeah, I can see what they were trying to do with it. I see the game plan is pretty clear. I just don't think you can really win the long game that easily. You're just going to get out-tempoed by Ruby Emerald with Dragonfires or Mother Knows Best, and the Amethyst deck has Dr. Facilier, which is just a card that kind of goes over the top of your Maui a little bit. So I just don't like it that much, yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that for sure. So with that being said, how would you upgrade this with a budget in mind? Okay,
so first of all, I think it's really important to take out some of the less effective guards and try to create a more cohesive game plan. So some of the cards that we took out are the Goons, the Flounders, the Jasmines, Hercules, Kristoff, Aurora Briar Rose, Maleficence, Simba Rifle Air, Ransack, and the items in the deck like Magic Golden Flower and Coconut Basket.
You mean you're not going to keep those?
I'm not going to... Hey, they'll be in a different deck later, but not in this one. Okay. So yeah, we're not going to keep those. And then we added some cards that tried to really play well to the early game, and some cards that try to play well more towards the late game, Like, we finished out the Captain Hooks, the Auroras, the Gramatalas, the Mickey Mouse Detective, added another Aurora Dreaming Guardian, another Maleficent Uninvited, just as kind of like that mid-range threat that can really threaten the Amethyst Ruby decks. Added another Develop Your Brain, another Smash, a couple more One Jump Aheads just to finish out all the ink ramp that we're going to have. We added 3 more Grab the Swords, which brings the total up to 4, which makes the deck a lot more resilient and capable against the other aggressive decks. We added 4 Simba Future Kings. That is just a really strong 1-drop that can help filter your draws to help you find the cards that you need for that specific matchup. We added 4 Philoctetes, which I think is probably the most important addition to this deck. It just makes your Simba Future Kings, your Gramatalas, and your Mickey Mouse Detectives into actual threats on the board that can really challenge what your opponent's characters are doing. It makes your Simba able to challenge into a Mad Hatter or Kuzco, and that's not really a big loss for you at all. So I think that's a really important one when it comes to keeping your board state comparable to your opponents in the early and the mid game. We also added 3 Hans just as a really strong mid-range card. It combines really well with Grab Your Swords, with Smashes, and with Fire the Cannons, just providing that little extra damage to take out some of your opponent's threats. And then we added a couple more bigger bodies in Triton Seeking. So yeah, we wanted, since we were finishing out the ramp package, we wanted a couple more big-bodied threats. Triton has a lot of willpower, a lot of strength, and a quest for 2. And it's an inkable threat, so I really like that one. I think it's possible we could have added a couple more threats, but I think I want to worry about the early game a little bit more so we could actually get to the late game and start dropping the bigger threats down.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like, too, the addition of Phil is really good interaction with some of the other characters.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I hit on it pretty quickly, but you just have in this deck 12 cards that have 1 strength that just aren't relevant on the board.
They're kind of dead weight.
Yeah, they're just dead weight. They might challenge into something to do 1 extra damage. I mean, Grandma Tala, that's usually what she does half the time. She challenges into something, does that 1 damage, and then she goes into your Inkwell. But Phil really makes them actual threats on the battlefield, and I think that is really powerful, turning your Simbas, your Talas, and your Mickeys into legit pieces of cardboard on the battlefield. That's really big when you're trying to get ahead in tempo and ahead on board in the early game.
Yeah, for sure. And because I'm thinking, too, right now, already kind of thinking about the current metagame, one of the most common combos that we see for Amber Steel is Lilo, Simba Bodyguard. And so with that Grammatala and Phil, not only would you make her strong enough to just get rid of the Simba, but you're also, like, obviously you want her to go into your Inkwell, but you want to be productive about it.
Yeah.
You don't want it to just be, oh, let me just put like a little piddly 1 damage. You're actually able to remove one of their characters from the board.
Yeah.
So that's super good.
Yeah, and against the Emerald matchup, it's really good. Just being able to challenge your opponent's Mad Hatters and Kuzcos, like I said. All these characters, with the help of Phil, challenge those cards. So I think it's a really strong card. I actually think it's probably a little underutilized currently, but I think in a shell where you have a bunch of cards that kind of do something when they come into play, but then they don't really have a lot of good bodies, this is something that can really enable those to be that much stronger.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Alright, yeah, so this deck only has 15 uninkables. That is a very reasonable amount when we're just ramping anyway. We can actually probably play a few more uninkables if we wanted to, just because we're just putting more cards into our Inkwell naturally. So if there were some really, really strong uninkable finishers, then that's something that we could actually look into, and that will That'll be in the next version of this deck when we see Hades a little bit. But yeah, so I think in this deck you just don't need to worry about how many uninkables you have as much because you're just naturally having more ink anyway. It's less of a factor.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, this still has the same game plan, controlling the board early with challengers, fill, ramping the ink to play the expensive characters later. This is a more clean version of the deck, more focused. So why don't we get into the deck that you brought today, Dana?
Yeah, I definitely can. Before I get into mine, though, I actually forgot to mention something when I was talking about my impressions of this deck. So I want to backtrack a little bit to that. There are two things that kind of make me pretty salty about these colors. So I know each color gets a shift. And so for Steel, you have the Captain Hook and the Tink. Obviously, keep the Tink as a shift. She's so good. I'm a little salty that they didn't make Simba the shift instead of Captain Hook. Maybe that's just me, but
I feel like Simba is a little bit more iconic of a character. It would have been really sweet to see a shift version of that one. So yeah, I think Simba is just such an iconic character that they probably missed out not making a shift character in this color, especially when you have a very playable one drop. Maybe they thought the same thing about Captain Hook. I don't know, but yeah, I definitely think a shift Simba would have been sick in this color. I'm sure we'll get one eventually, but
yeah. Maybe they'll make one in Amber with that Simba, but yeah, I agree. Captain Hook still is very recognizable, but Simba's more lovable.
Yeah, Simba is just an awesome character. I'm really surprised they didn't give that one a shift, but especially because there's such a growth period to him. I think it would have been cool to have his younger version baby Simba as a card, and then his older, more mature version as a shift. I think that would have been really cool flavor wise as well.
Right.
But
yeah, so I'm a little salty about that, and then I'm really salty. I know he's not in the starter deck. I know that. But Cerberus, why did they not make him a bodyguard? He's literally the bodyguard of the underworld.
He is.
I don't know why that makes me so tilted. I don't get it. They missed out on that's how he is in his story.
I know. I think they found like a good stat line and cost for it, and then they're just like, well, we can't give a bodyguard, that might be too good.
I know, but
I think that would have been okay. Cerberus is a sweet character.
Why wouldn't you play into how he is presented in Hercules? He's literally a bodyguard. I don't know. So that makes me... Don't get me started on that. Well, I guess we kind of did, but...
In any mythology, Cerberus is Hades' bodyguard, right? So, yeah, I totally empathize with you.
So I just had to get that off my chest, and then now I feel...
Do you feel better?
Yeah, I can move on to my deck now. All right, so basically I took Dalton's budget deck, and I just upgraded that even more.
You amped it up a little bit.
I amped it up. So you did keep a significant amount of cards in that starter deck. You only got rid of a handful of them and then upped quantities of others. You only added four new cards.
Yeah, and one important thing to know is I really only added $28 worth of cards as well.
Yeah, and that's pretty
good.
That's pretty good for an upgrade, to be honest, for a budget upgrade, especially if you're able to score a starter deck for MSRP, like $17, I think. So only having to add $28 to upgrade it is pretty good.
Yeah, $50 for a deck that could play reasonably well against a lot of decks is pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I took, like I said, yours. I took out even more cards and then added more that weren't in the original.
Of course.
So there were a lot of the more expensive cards that you had in there, like ink expensive wise. So you had your Maui still, you had your Scar Mastermind, your Simba, your Mufasa. You kept all of those in there and then just kind of played around it. I got rid of those. So going down the list, similar to Dalton, I cut Flounder. cut the goons. I took out the Aurora shifting. So I took
both versions.
I took her out I took both out altogether. So I took out Aurora Regal Princess and Aurora Briar Rose and the Aurora Dreaming Guardian. Took all of those out. Also took out Jasmine, Hercules, Kristoff, Maleficent, Sinister Visitor, Maleficent Uninvited, Simba, Rightful Heir, Mufasa, Scar, Simba, Returned King, Maui, Develop Your Brain, Fire the Cannons, Ransack, Golden Flower, Coconut Basket.
Wait, you took those out too?
I took those out too.
Wow, copycat. You took out the items as well.
Took out the bad items, yes.
Yes.
And then I either bumped up a similar amount to Dalton, or I might have added a couple more, I think. So I added 2 Prince Erics, so now I'll have 4 total, whereas you just kept the 2, I believe. But yeah, bumped up the Captain Hook like you did, bumped up Grandma Tala, Beast, bumped him up to 4, because I know you hadn't, but I think he's a pretty good card, so bumped him up. Smash, One Jump Ahead, Grab Your Swords, all of those got up. And then what I added was I kept the 4 Simba Future King that you had. I kept the 4 Phil that you had. You had 3 Hans, so I bumped it up to 4. And then I didn't keep your Triton in there, but I added the Tiny Tink, Big Tink combo. So that shift. If we're not having an upgrade budget, we're adding Big Tink.
We're adding Big Tink into the steel deck. Yep, I totally agree.
Yep.
Very strong.
Added in 2 Robin Hoods also, 4 Hades, and 3 Let It Goes. Hades is going to be... Hades and the Big Tink are your most expensive cards for this upgrade, but they're worth it. Obviously, everybody knows Big Tink is... Big Tink's Big Tink.
Big Tink is very good, yeah.
It's very good. So, I mean, that's to be expected. And Hades really helps play into the game plan that we have. We're basically continuing the same one. Ramping up the Inkwell, challenging, controlling the board early to get to your big ones. And Hades, with him being able to take away, it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of like the only true removal that this deck has. Because
Has Let It Go.
Yeah, Let It Go. Like between these but I mean, like as far as like, I guess that's kind of like the equivalent. So the Hades and the Let It Go is basically like your Dragonfire and your Dragon Maleficent of Ruby. You have you have a card with a character that does it, but then you also have an action that does it too. So that's kind of the equivalent of that.
Yeah, they do it slightly worse because they give your opponent an ink out of it, but Let It Go being a song and inkable is really strong, and Hades being 7 cost is also really strong as opposed to the 9 cost that Maleficent is.
Right. Although you could argue at least that Maleficent is inkable, whereas this Hades is not.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, still playing into that type of play style. Of course, with the Big Tink, she has that enter the battlefield ability that gets triggered, so you're dealing damage, and I mean, it's just so good. But
yeah, so you have a lot of AoE removal, which is area of effect, so it hits all their characters, right? You have some single target removal in Hades, Let It Go, and to a lesser extent, Smash.
Right.
It can also do it, but it's just
depends on how big that character is.
It's just less good at it.
Right.
So you're really good at controlling the board, and then you have some card draw in Robin Hood. You have some other item removal in the Beast. So you have a very cohesive game plan here. Yeah, so I think this deck looks really strong.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. I feel like a lot of people kind of hate on the Beast right now, but I know that you and I really don't think he's that bad. Yes, there aren't very many items currently that people play that are really good, but if you're thinking of one of the big decks that you're going to see in the metal right now, that's the Amethyst Ruby, and they're probably going to play the Shield, which they can unexert their character.
Shield, Mirror, Cauldron.
That's true.
Pocket Watch.
So yeah, although there aren't very many good items right now, there are enough to where this could be pretty good if you have a matchup against it.
Yeah, there are actually a lot of decks that will have items in it. I know some of the other Sapphire decks might have the Fishbone Quill.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the Amber decks will have the Lantern. Mm-hmm. Some of the other Steel decks might have the Beast Smear, which I think could have been a card we could have played, but we just didn't really. It just didn't really fit necessarily.
Yeah, it didn't cross our mind because it didn't really fit our game plan. Yeah. So.
But yeah, there's a lot of decent and playable items. So the Beast just coming in and wrecking one of them, and if not, it's just a card that you ink early. It's totally good.
Mm-hmm. Or it deals. I mean, it deals a pretty decent amount of damage too. It could get rid of some too. So it's kind of a multifaceted card that you could get a lot out of. But I think a lot of people kind of dismiss it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right, I'm gonna put you to the test here.
Oh goodness.
A Whole New World is one of the most powerful and probably one of the most played Steel cards. Why wouldn't you include it in this deck?
I feel like it doesn't fit our deck's game plan. Mm-hmm. Similar to how I had asked you last week about the Be Prepared, and you said it didn't fit that game plan. I think it applies here as well. We have a lot of mid-range to late cards that are in our deck that we're going to hold on to until we can play them. So it's not like we're not going to want to clear our hand when we're trying to hold on to, like, if we draw those, we're waiting to play those later. It's just not going to benefit us and play into our game plan to wipe out our hand to try to draw. I don't know. I just felt like it wasn't going to fit.
Yeah, so no, I see what you're saying. If you still have 4 cards in your hand by the time you play this, then you might be benefiting. If your opponent has 2 cards in hand, you're benefiting them more than what you're getting the benefit out of it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from. Yeah, so I really like the look of this deck. It seems like it has some pretty powerful draws. I think A Whole New World could fit if we found a way to put in Bell. Mm-hmm. Because you're emptying your hand a lot faster.
Right.
But again, Bell isn't really what this deck is doing currently. So I can definitely see leaving it out as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know what is in the next deck you have to prepare us for and what that consists of. I do know it's going to be an item deck because I know you have been talking about it. Do you have this card in your item deck? Do you have A Whole New World?
I do.
All right.
So let's get into the item deck that we're alluding to. So the whole game plan is essentially to get Maurice out and some number of aerials out, and then just play a bunch of items, draw a bunch of cards, and quest for a bunch with Ariel. Mm-hmm. The reason why I think that this deck could be really cool is that you have a lot of tools to answer your opponent's board with Big Tink and Grab Your Sword, so you're not going to get rushed down by the Steel Amber decks as much. Mm-hmm. So let me just go over the list real quick. Okay. We have 3 Tinkerbells, 4 Maurices, 2 Mickey Mouse Detectives. I only have 2 in here. I wanted a little bit of ramp and that early game, but I didn't want to play Grandma Tala just because that's a little bit slower.
I was going to ask you why you didn't have her, so that makes sense.
We have 4 of the Ariel, Who's a Collector, 4 Simba Future King, just as another cheap character to play that can help you find the Maurices or whatever card you're needing. Mm-hmm. 3 Hades, just as another way to answer their threats. 2 Tamatoa So Shiny because it's a sweet card. It's a giant threat that can end the game quickly. It's also inkable for when you don't need it. And then we have 4 Bell Strange But Specials to round out the characters. 4 One Jump Ahead, again, looking for another ink ramp card. Grab Your Swords, we have 2 of those. I think we don't need too many of these effects when we have Tinkerbell, and we also want to be able to enact our game plan, so we just can't have that many cards that don't fit the game plan. Mm-hmm. Then we have 4 A Whole New Worlds to increase the card trawl of our deck. 4 Beastmere, 4 Scepter of Arendelle, 4 Magical and Flower, 4 Eye of the Fates, and 4 Fishbone Quills. Mm-hmm. This deck has a lot of engram in it between the quills, the bells, the Mickey Mouse and the one jump ahead. But what I also really like about it is that while you're putting all these cards into your ink, you also have a whole new world to draw a bunch of cards to refill your hand back up. And that, along with Maurice, gives you some redundancy and some consistency to your draws. So you can, have those combo turns with Ariel, or the turn where you just quest for 8 or something with Tamatoa. It lets you find your answer to, maybe they have Ursula or something that's going to quest for a lot, so you can find your Hades. Yeah, so this is a version of the deck that I really like. Of course, you have to play some not optimal cards like the Magic Golden Flower.
I was going to say, it's like you almost are using it just because it's an item.
It is. It's an inkable item. It's cheap, but it's also a one-cost item that can ready Ariel and draw a card off Maurice pretty easily. Beast Mirror, I think, is just another way to draw cards. It's also an inkable item. And then Scepter of Arendelle, that can help you get the board early if you need to with giving a character support. Helps you create a little bit more of a board presence, but also another cheap inkable item that if it's not good, or if you need to get up to Maurice just to cast Maurice, you can just ink it and wash your hands of it. Yeah, so this has a lot of combo potential, a lot of card draw. We're trying to be able to keep the board nice and clean, so your Tamatoas, even your Bells, can quest for a lot at some point in the game, and your Ariels can hopefully do their combo thing. The one thing I'm kind of hesitant on in this deck is the number of uninkables. You have 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. You have 19 uninkables in this deck, and I think when you're playing Bell, you want to keep that number to a minimum so you can constantly put 2 ink down a turn, and you might not be able to do that super consistently with 19 uninkables. But again, we have a lot of card draw on Maurice and a whole new world, and even Tiny Tink, because you can draw a card, discard a card. Same thing with Simba. That, maybe that's just not something to worry about too much.
Yeah. What do you think is going to be the weakness of this? Because I know.
I think the Ruby Amethyst decks are going to be really hard to beat because they have a lot of removal with Dragonfires and Maleficents that as soon as you play a Maurice, it's probably just not going to stick around for very long. And that's a card that they need to answer, but they do have a lot of answers to it. So that might be kind of rough.
I think this items deck, it's a really cool concept. I think it's a lot of fun to play, and I believe that as more cards come out, more sets come out, better items, I think an item deck is going to be a really cool archetype. Yes, thank you. I think it's going to be a really cool archetype that people are going to be rocking. So if you were interested in getting the full deck list of this one and the other 2 upgrades we previously talked about, all 3 of those are on our Lorcania page, and I will put links to each of the individual decks down into the description of this episode. So if you're interested in that, go check it out.
I think what we'll also do is we'll put the decks we're going to be we competed with in the tournament that's tomorrow. We'll also include those on our Lorcania page as well, so you can see what we played.
Absolutely.
All right, next we have a listener question of the week, right, Dana?
We do. It's on our Discord. So if you ever have questions that you want us to answer on our episodes, go to our Discord. We have a listener mailbag channel, so you can ask your questions there. But we have one from Lights Out 87. So I'm going to ask you this because you have
Shout out to Lights Out.
I'll ask you this because you have more experience with competing with TCGs. So I feel like you would be a good person to answer this one. So Lights Out 87 asked, when you lose, how do you figure out if it's mistakes you made from Mulligan, specific plays, etc., or just an unwinnable game? Or is that something that comes from just repetition and practice?
That is a very good and important question. Whenever I lose, I usually just assume that there was something I could have done better. a lot of the times, especially in this game, that comes down to your initial mulliganing decisions. If you would have mulliganed that extra one or two cards, maybe you would have found the cards that you needed a little more quickly. Maybe you would have found another Ink Bolt in time. But there are definitely going to be those some small subset of games where you feel like, you know what, they just had it. There wasn't anything I could do, and that's okay. But I think it's really important to just assume there was something you could do better, and then try to reflect on that afterward, because that's how you learn, that's how you get better. If you just always assume that you're unlucky, you're never going to get better at TCGs, because you're actively not trying to learn anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, just try to be reflective, try to think back on the games and think, maybe if I would have challenged here, maybe if I would have quested here, the game would have turned out a little bit differently. Those are the questions you have to ask yourselves. What could you do? What could you have done? But yeah, that's a really great question, a really important topic, and that's a really important concept to think about in TCGs. So thank you. I appreciate you asking that, Lights Out.
Yeah, that was a really great question. Thank you. All right, so what do we got upcoming for our next episode, Dalton?
Our next episode is going to be a really fun one. We're going to talk about how our tournament goes tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully, we have some good news. It's not just us losing twice and then exiting. That would not be great. But I think we're both going to do pretty reasonably well. We'll talk about our deck lists, why we submitted the lists that we did, what changes we would make to those lists going forward. We'll talk about the metagame, maybe if we would bring a different deck to a tournament. So yeah, there's a lot that we can learn from that tournament, and we're going to make a pretty good episode about it, I think.
Yeah. I think you'll be able to tell how we do based on how we sound when we start the episode.
If our demeanor is positive, you know we did well. No. It'll be a fun episode.
Yeah, for sure.
After that, we are continuing our starter deck giveaway. So we have already given away one starter deck. You have a chance to win one of two that are left: the Emerald Ruby or the Amethyst Amber starter decks.
Oh, yeah.
Dana, why don't you tell us how you can win those?
Yeah, so we are giving away starter decks when we reach each of the milestones on Twitch, 50 followers and 100 followers. So in order to enter, go follow us on Twitch, then go to our Discord, and we have a giveaway channel. Comment in that, and that is your ticket to enter for it. And then once we hit those milestones, we will be drawing names when we stream after, unless it's in the moment, and we hit those during a stream.
We will spin the wheel of names. We love the wheel.
The wheel, like the episode on The Office when they had the wheel of chores.
The wheel of chores.
And then it wasn't as fun, so they made the mini wheel.
They made the mini wheel of chores, but no one minded the mini wheel.
Yeah. She was like, there's still chores involved, but no one minds because it's the mini wheel.
It's so cute. No one even cares.
Such a good episode. Oh, gosh. So where can you find us?
All right. You can find us pretty much anywhere at the Inkwell Gamers. You can find us on Twitch, X, Twitter, all kinds of stuff. Discord.
Yep. Instagram.
We have our own Discord.
We're on it all.
Yeah, just follow us on it all. We'll be posting some more content on YouTube especially. I have a pretty exciting series coming out on an online tournament I did.
Yes.
Other than that, yeah, I think that's it for this week, Dana.
It is. You guys have a good week, and we'll talk to you next week.
Have a great week.